This is a tutorial about how I created this portrait of war veteran Stan on location outside a church in country Victoria. Now, it's a 3-light setup that I used. I had to light the interior of the church, the exterior of the church, and also Stan. Now, when I arrived at the location, I already had an idea in my mind's eye of what I wanted the location to look like. As you can see, it's not, I pictured in my mind's eye a rustic church in a rustic country location, but what I was instead given was something slightly newer, and the location was almost quite suburban. So I needed to create something with the limitations that I had. Now, the first thing that I do when I arrive at a location like this is I want to work out how I'm going to light it and where I'm going to position my model. So I determined that the best angle was the one we're looking at here, and I wanted my model to be sitting on that park bench because I quite liked the emergency exit sign, emergency assembly area sign above his head. And I also liked the way that having him in the image in this way gave it all a sense of scale. I wanted him to be dwarfed in the frame. Now, the lighting setup for this was I wanted it to be quite moody. And so in order to do that, I used a grid spot. And you can see that here, and that's using my battery-operated Elinchrom Quadra kit. So there it is there. I also wanted to light the facade of the church, so I set up a light for the outside. And finally, I needed to create some light flooding through the stained glass windows because I wanted to give the illusion of that it was like later in the day and there was light flooding out from the interior of the church. Now, with a setup like this, it's really important that each light is tested individually to light the shot. So the first thing I do is get a base exposure. So in this case, I tested my background and I found that probably the correct exposure is ISO 100 f8 1/200th of a second, and I was shooting on the 24-105 at 24 millimeters. So what I needed to establish is how I wanted my shot to look, and that's why it's really important to have an idea of how you want the final image to look, because that's going to determine how you light and how you expose your image. So at the correct exposure of f8 1/200th of a second, I thought that the overall image looked a bit bright, so I wanted to drop the exposure a little bit. So to establish my base exposure, I went down a stop to f11, and that's that there. So that's my base exposure. From here on in, my settings on my camera are not going to change. I'm going to add light to the shot, and I'm going to do this by testing the lights one at a time. If I try and set up all the lights at once and test everything at once, it's really difficult to know how each light is affecting your shot. So it's really crucial when you're using more than one light to test each light individually. So the first light that I'm going to test is the light that's going to be on my model, Stan, and he's going to be sitting on the park bench. And what I wanted to do is light him in. I didn't want to light his entire body. I didn't want to use soft light. I wanted to use a small spot of light just on his face. And I wanted to have some sort of direction, like the light was coming from camera left. So I set up a grid spot on a boom, and that was coming in from camera left. Now, the first test was kind of flat onto his face, and that gives me an indication of what the lighting is doing, and there's a reason why it's a test shot. It's so you can see what the light's doing, and in this instance it was too much and there was no direct. You can also see that the grid spot causes a harsh shadow when it's placed front on, because there's the wall directly behind him. So I didn't like that, and I didn't like that it looked artificial. What I wanted to create was a really soft side lighting that looked more like late evening sunshine. So moving the light around so that it was coming in from camera left gave a softer light, more of a split lighting effect. And it also meant that using the grid spot, because it's a narrow beam of light that is concentrated when you place a grid onto a light, meant that I was also missing the wall, and it gave a much softer light. Now you can see that the settings for my camera didn't change. I'm still at ISO 100 f11 1/200th of a second, and the side lighting is looking a lot more natural, and you can see that when there isn't any lighting, that it's underexposed. So I'm adding light to the shot. The other thing I like to do when I'm shooting an image like this that is so wide and the figure is actually tiny in the frame, is for my test shots, I will come in really tight and zoom in on the face so that it's almost filling the frame, so I can see exactly what my lighting is doing, rather than having to, even if I'm shooting tethered, to enlarge the frame to see the lighting. I think this way is a much safer way to shoot when you're in the test phase of the shoot. So zoom in, don't be afraid to zoom right in and do the test shot so you can see exactly how your lighting is working, and then you can see if there are harsh shadows. Particularly when you're doing side lighting like this, you tend to get shadows across the nose, and this is the best way to avoid that. There's a couple of different techniques that you can use to measure your lighting when you're using flash. Firstly, there's guessing, which basically you set up your lights and set your base exposure, and then you want to be starting at, say, a low power, and just increase the power and then have a look at the back of the screen and until you get the desired look that you want. This isn't that accurate, and it involves a lot of chimping, and it basically, I think, it slows down the whole process, and there is room for error. Sometimes if you're using the back of the screen to tell if your exposure is right or not, you depending on how your camera screen looks, or if you're in bright sunlight, it's hard to see, and you can only hope that you get the right exposure. The most accurate way is to use a light meter, and the way you expose for your lighting in this instance is to set your light meter up to non-chord, and you want to set the shutter speed that you want to shoot at and the ISO, and then you want to hold the light meter in front of this area that you're lighting. The light meter is reading actual light that is hitting your subject. So in this instance, the light meter goes in front of my model on the side where the light is coming. So it's camera left in front of the area that I'm lighting, and that the reading that I'm looking for is F11. That's going to give me the correct skin tone for that part of his face. The next light that I'm testing is the interior light, the stained glass. So I wanted to light that up to look like it was being lit from inside the church. The first attempt was using a flash head that had a reflector, so it's very similar to this light here that was used to light the outside of the church. So we had that facing on the glass, and the first shot shows just a hot spot in the middle, and the light is really concentrated, so I needed the spread of light to be a lot wider. So we played around with moving the light back, moving it forward, but we continued to get this hot spot. So and turning the light up also just was in this example, it's too bright. It looks ridiculous. It's white hot in the middle. So, and that light would be too strong, and in the image it would be the first area that people look. So I needed a light that looked a lot more natural and a lot warmer. So what we did was we tried positioning the light in a few different ways, and finally the best solution was to actually take the reflector off the light and just point it up into the ceiling, so that it was just it created an even spread of light into the interior of the church, and that gave the best result. So there was like just a matter of tweaking the angle of the light and experimenting until we got the light that was most pleasing. So you can see in this example there's still a hot spot in the middle, so it's just a matter of moving the light until we got a nice even spread, and this was the final exposure. So again, the test shot shows that my camera settings don't change. I've turned the grid spot off, and I'm only testing the interior light at this point. And once I'm happy with that, I can then move on to lighting the exterior of the church. Now, in terms of light setting, it's just a matter of starting at low power and gradually moving up in power until you get the desired result. All flash heads will be different depending on the size of the flash head you're using and the type of the flash head. So if you're using a speed light, it's going to be a completely different exposure at half power as if you were using a studio light, which is far more powerful. So basically just set your light at, say, start at a quarter power and then move up gradually from there. And I think that's the best way for you to get an accurate idea of how to light an interior like this. The final test shot is lighting the exterior. So basically I just wanted the facade of the church lit up, and particularly the cross. So we tweaked around with the lighting, and again, just using that technique, starting low and then gradually increasing the power until the image looked right. Very difficult to get up on top of the roof to take a light reading. So this exterior was a bit of guesswork until we finally got the desired results. And finally, once all the lights have been individually tested, the final test is to turn all the lights on and see how the shot looks with everything on. And you can see in the final test shots here that we did actually change the angle of the exterior light slightly. So you're seeing that there are shadows caused in the facade. Across the facade here, you can see these shadows. They're caused by this exterior light. But I know that in post-production, once I've taken a shot with all the lights on and I have my model in frame, the final image that I'm going to take is where I remove the lights from the shot and just do a clean plate with available light, and then I can blend the two exposures and I can easily edit out those shadows using exposure blending. And now it's time to shoot. So everything is set up. I am ready to go. There is no testing necessary at this point. So I can bring my model onto the set, and here comes Stan. And I can, like, realistically, if I've done everything right at this point, frame one should be usable. So all the testing is out of the way. You want to just take a minute to sit down with the model and calm him down and just point out what is going on with the shoot. I've got him with the Bible and also a little statue of a dog. And then the one thing that I did ask him to do is take his glasses off for the shoot. So if I can, I usually ask people to take their glasses off before I do the shot. And get him into position all my props, show him how I want everything held, put everything in place, and then I'm giving him a little bit of direction there, showing him how I want everything held, and then giving him an eye line off with the glasses and showing him where I want him to be facing. So I've got an eye line, and just, it's always a good idea to say, this is where the light is. This is where you need to be facing, so that they've got an idea, especially when it is a grid spot and the type of light is very tight. So moving like a few millimeters either way can mean that the light actually misses their face. So got him into position, and then it's just a matter of getting the shot now. So everything is set up, ready to go. Frame one should be usable. Now you can see that we've also brought in a reflector. So that's just going to fill Stan's face a little bit camera right, and I've just got him to scooch over a little bit. Now I'm shooting on the 24 to 105. I'm at 24 millimeters and I'm actually very low to the ground. I'm kneeling at this point. And so I'm just going to run through the series. So at this point, lighting is right. I'm not checking lighting. That is all looking fine. What I want to do is just make sure my composition is right, and I'm focusing on his expression and the camera angle, and you can just see that I'm just checking focus there as well, making sure that everything is sharp and everything looks good. And then it's a matter of just firing off the shots and getting a whole series on the 24 to 105. Once I'm happy that I've got the shot, the final shot to take is one without the lights in the frame. So everyone is cleared from the set. It's set for Stan, and I get a clean plate just using available light. And this image will be my base image to merge with the lit shot so that I can easily remove the lights and any shadows on the facade in Photoshop. Once I've got my safety shot, the shot I was there to get, it was time to experiment. So I like to change up the camera height. I know I've got my shot safely in the bag, and so what I wanted to do was try out the 16 to 35mm lens and push in a bit closer. So it was going to give me more of a dramatic look. So that's what I'm doing here, and basically exactly the same setup, exactly the same settings on my camera, ISO 100, 1/200th of a second at f11, but this time I'm shooting at 16mm instead of 24, and I'm using the 16 to 35. So the final variation on this series was to shoot with a longer lens, and the reason I'm doing this is because I now want Stan to fill a lot more of the frame and make the church appear smaller in the frame. So what I need to do is get all the way back, because I'm shooting at 70 on the 70 to 200, and move the model all the way forward so that he's filling more of the frame. So you bring him in, and basically the lighting pretty much stays the same. So I've got the light will still be on in the background, and it will still be on in the church, but again, I'm taking the same steps as when I set up my lighting initially. So I test my front light without any lights in the background, and then I add the lighting in the background to see what that looks like. And once I'm happy with all of that, I can bring Stan back into the frame and shoot this, where he fills the frame and there's just like a hint of the building in the background, but he's taking up more of the frame. Again, down low to give him a heroic look, and the grid spot this time is lighting his face from above and slightly to camera right to give his face a little bit of shape. The final part of the puzzle is to always make sure that, because you can see that my light is in the frame, is the last shot is to get a clean plate without any lighting in it so that I can easily retouch the light out of frame.